After e4, e5, knight f3, knight c6, bishop c4, the Italian game is on the board, f5. So in this video we're going to go through a few things that we haven't gone through at all, so that we can close the saga once for all. Let's look first of all at this move, d4, right? This is the main move. And now, as we know, we have to take in e4 with an attack on the knight, and now the white player is going to play knight e5. However, let's look at this crazy gambit that they played to me, just so that I can prove that it doesn't work. Although it was interesting. White can castle now and ignore the knight. Okay, well, take the knight. Queen takes back, there's a threat of mate in f7, you play queen to f6, rushing to swap the pieces. And after queen to g3, obviously any swap will favor black because we're up a piece. Knight to d4, take this pawn, bishop to g5, best move, attacking the queen. The best, most appropriate response to all of this is obviously with queen, don't want to play queen g6 because queen takes e5 and it's game over. So you're going to play knight f5 with a double attack. Now the queen cannot move. You're going to be able to take the queen and then take back and just swap queens and carry on with the game. Unless you think that the queen maybe can go to g4, the only square from where the queen would be defending the bishop. But I play h5 and the queen is getting away from that square and there's no compensation. White will have to take you take the queen, and then white takes the pawn in e5. Looks interesting, but then just d6. Zero compensation. Black is winning the game. And in this position, if the bishop just takes the queen, then we take the opponent queen. And there are no visions. You might argue bishop takes g7, winning another pawn. It's dangerous. Take, and now take. And I'll simply play knight to h6 to stop the bishop or the rook infiltrating together. But it's not like there's something was going to happen. And again, you're up a piece. You're winning this game. Alright, so let's look at another line that we haven't seen from one of the previous lines, of course. So f5, and now what happens when white plays knight c3? So again, we have talked about this extensively, but there's one line I didn't go through. And now, as we know, let's look at this line. So we take the pawn in e4, as you remember from one of the previous videos. Knight takes back d5, making a fork. And now this crazy sacrifice, bishop to b5. This is one of the thematic moves. It's a thematic sacrifice, but it's not supposed to be good, and you need to know what to do to punish it. So here we take the knight. And now the sacrifice goes on, exploiting the pin. White plays knight e5. There's a threat of coming down with the queen. There's double attack on c6. Black's best move now is to remember it's queen to g5, ignoring the double attack on this knight. So knight to c6 is met with the queen to b5 moves. This is very important. And now, in one of the previous videos, exactly, I think it was the 4th video of the saga of how to beat the Italian, I said that the knight was trapped, but this is actually easier said than done. So look, knight to d4 is the move I needed to have a look at to continue. Okay, so we are continuing this line from that, and let's go on now. Queen to c5, saving the queen from the attack of the knight, renewing the attack on the knight. Now, there's no way to defend that knight that makes sense. Also, what you need to consider is that black is up a piece. There's a sacrifice, and the sacrifice was not accurate. And staying on the 5th rank is important because it stops queen h5 idea from coming, and it's a bit of an annoying move to meet, although it's still fine. If white protects the knight, goes, let's say, c3 to defend the knight, you just play bishop d7 and castle long. And that's it. Position evaluated -4. So what else can you ask for? If white continues the attack, plays knight to b3, you just play queen back to g5, threatening g2, meaning that there's no discovered attack on the queen that make any sense. And that's it. You're going to continue the game like this. Castling to find some safety doesn't work, because as soon as you castle, you play bishop h3. And a move like g3 here is obviously punished with bishop g4 straight away. What a joke. So now let's look at another line. So this one is still going to be about d3, like most of them. So d3 now, we don't take. We play knight f6, and now knight to c3. So this is not like when white plays knight c3 straight away without playing d3, and we can take in f4, knight takes back, and then d5. But as you remember from the previous video, you play bishop to b4, pinning the knight. putting more attack over the pawn in e4. So white castles, unpinning the knight, and now you take the pawn here. Now, as we've said in one of the previous videos, knight takes is not good because you can play d5. Yes, the knight will eventually, well, obviously this is a fork, so the knight has to take it, but then pawn takes back, and this gives a much better endgame for black, as you remember. Go watch that video. It's on the third video to have your idea more clear. So in this position, again, we play bishop b4, castle, we take, and now white takes back the pawn, you take the knight, pawn takes back, and we have created this weakness. But you have to be careful because it's an open game and you just gave up the bishop pair. So, as mentioned, we played d6, and now the key move that we need to look at, and one of the most popular moves, in the previous video we went through a4, white retaining the possibility to play, because here's the thing, we want to play knight a5, right? Remember this. The idea here, remember, you want to play knight a5, take the bishop, swap the knight with the bishop, and take the free pawn in e4. Okay, this pawn in e4 is not free right now because, as you know, queen going to d5 attacks the knight, threatens f7, and you're done. That's it. So a4 will be one of the moves because it allows the bishop to stay on the board and play bishop to a2. But in this video, we're going to go through h3. This is important because it stops bishop g4 from happening. It's one of the thematic moves, one of the moves you want to play. So what to do now? Okay, usually when white doesn't play that move, you just play bishop g4, and then you eventually want to play that move like knight e7, knight g6, knight f4. Okay, and put the knight in f4 where the knight will be sitting to the right of the father. But white plays h3 now, so immediately go for the attack on that bishop. So to make an example, just to make the point, if bishop goes to b3, you just take it. Don't even think about it. Pawn takes back, reuniting the pawn structure, but now we're taking e4. There's no compensation. Queen d5 doesn't do anything. You just move the knight again. And that's it. The queen will have to move away. Knight to f6, the queen moves away. You just up a pawn. So let's see if white can maybe go on with development and find some compensation. Rook e1, bishop f5. Queen to d5, doubling the attack on the knight and also attacking b7. c6, attack the queen. That's it. Queen to c4, remaining relevant. Because now the rook might want to take the knight and win, then take two minor pieces for a rook. d5, attack the queen. Queen to d3. The plan is already over. Queen f6. Ready to make a king safe. Bishop to a3, stopping us from castling that side, but not stopping us from castling this side. And this is just a perfectly winning position for black. There's nothing to worry. These pawns are really strong. This queen is nowhere to go. And, you know, you're 100% safe. Also threatening to move the knight. Should be an easy, relatively easy win for the black player here. So here you might be wondering, okay, what if instead of bishop b3, which is the whole point, our opponent preserves the bishop pair and plays bishop to e2, going to the right square for the bishop. The bishop in d3 will be penalized, you know, he wouldn't really do anything. Yes, he will defend the pawn, but it will be badly placed. Bishop e2, the best move is definitely not to take here. Also because after this, then queen d5 attacks the two knights. And I personally don't really see a way to stop that from happening. I don't see a way to stop that fork. Well, so now castle. Rook e1, king to h8. Removing from the dangerous light diagonal. Rook to b1. Putting pressure on this pawn, a move that I always find annoying to deal with, but b6 just does everything. Okay, and that's it. There are no weaknesses in black's territory, even though our opponent has the bishop pair, but the pawn structure is permanently damaged. Besides, the black player is threatening to play knight takes e4. This is a completely free pawn with the threat of going to c3. Our knight is defended, so we don't have to worry about that fork. Besides, even queen to d5, I think you could even play bishop e7. Should do the job. So what to do now for our opponent? Okay, bishop to f1. Allowing the defense by the rook of the pawn in e4. Bishop a6, bishop e6, attacking the pawn, a4, stopping us from taking that pawn. Bishop to d7, targeting once again. Rook to a1, defending it, but now our opponent is confining the rook to a role of defender. And black has an idea of exploiting the weakness here by playing knight to b7, knight to c5. There will be double attack on this pawn, there will be double attack on this pawn. That should be it. So instead of rook a1, which is a very passive move, what if white plays bishop to b5, challenging our bishop and say, you know what, Let's make this happen. Okay, knight to b7. And now a move like c4 to consolidate the bishop. To consolidate the bishop, like just to make an example, will be met by knight to c5. So once again, we have a lot of pressure on these squares. And white's poor pawn structure is the reason why there should be, it is a better endgame for black. Black has got position evaluated minus 160 or something like that, so it should be a relatively easy endgame. Obviously, in this position, instead of c4, with white, like white swapping just makes our life easier, especially because white deprives himself of the bishop pair, making our endgame even easier. So in this position, earlier we went through bishop f1, so what happens if bishop to d3, right? Just to make an example. Black goes on with queen e8 and has an idea of playing bishop to d7 and then the usual knight b7, knight c5. That's how you're going to be playing this game. White has no moves, by the way. White can just make no moves that make any sense. He's got this weird pawn structure and the bishop is confined to a role of defending this pawn unless he wants to go to f1. So let's look at this move. Bishop g5, trying to deprive us of the very strong piece that attacks, puts pressure on e4. Queen to g6 is the best move. If bishop takes, then rook takes back. And then we have pressure on f3. And the idea is to simply play, develop the bishop, bishop to e6, rook to f8, doubling up the rooks, putting pressure on f3, allowing it to take in h3 first, thematic sacrifice with an attack on the knight. If instead that doesn't happen, black plays, you got a plan of playing knight h5. If white doesn't take your knight, you got a plan of playing knight h5. So if white plays a4 just to make a move, knight to h5. And now you have a plan of simply playing bishop to e6. The reason is you need the rook, the back rank to be protected, because here you have a plan of playing rook takes knight, right? Removing the defender of this bishop. Queen takes back. You can't take the bishop because of this. So you gotta play bishop e6, and then you're threatening that. h4, solidifying the defense of that bishop. It's just too late because the position of the white player is just terrible. Position evaluated as if black was up a piece, almost up a piece. Black's best move now is h6, getting rid of the bishop. Bishop to e3 allows us to play this thematic sacrifice anyway. Rook takes, pawn can't take, so white has to take the queen. But now bishop to g4 traps the queen. How unfortunate, you must say, because after h6 I decided to make the bishop go to e3. Okay, well, what if the bishop had gone to d2, which means that after queen takes the knight, then the queen will have an escape to e3, so the queen will not be trapped. Okay, this doesn't save much because bishop g4 puts a lot of pressure on this square and our opponent is in trouble. Now you might argue, okay, what about bishop e2? Saving that from happening. Okay, knight f4, going for the attack on this bishop, meaning that we are threatening to take that bishop, and then that's going to be it. Knight takes, white will have to take back, but then we can take this knight literally for free. So bishop will have to remove this very strong knight in f4, rook takes, pressure remains, we're threatening to double up and win material. Last attempt by white will be knight to h2. Seems to be making perfect sense to me. Bishop swaps. Queen takes, rook takes in h4. We'll drop the line here, we're completely winning. And in this position, the last mention is going to be knight to h2. This I'm mentioning because it happens so much. My opponent plays it so much. But it's dumb. And it's wrong, and it's because you play knight e4. That's it. Bishop to f3 with the compensation and a double attack on this knight, and the bishop's pinning the knight to the rook. There's double attack on it. You just play knight c3. That's it. There's no coming back. You're gonna attack here and here. You can save the rook, or you can take the opponent's rook. You're doing okay. And it's not like your knight gets trapped in b1, whereas this bishop doesn't get trapped, because if white plays queen d3, attacking the knight, take the rook. White takes our rook. And now c6 traps the bishop. So you're going to be able to play bishop f5 and carry on. So let's take it from the start and let's talk about something else that we have not discussed properly in one of the previous videos. So bishop c4, f5, d3, knight f6, and now the immediate castling. Okay, black goes on with bishop b4. And now here, this is one of the most annoying lines because this is white playing the best moves. Now the best move consists of, remember, white's best chance is to not play knight c3, because then you can take, and double isolate these pawns. So white will have to delay the development of the knight in c3 and play first a3, now bishop a5, and now b4, bishop b6, and now knight c3, with the possibility to play bishop g5, pinning a knight, play knight d5 in the ideal square, maybe threatening this bishop, or simply trade our knight, queen takes back, knight d5 is a tremendous move to meet. You don't want it to happen. Now here, as we know, we take the pawn, and after the pawn takes back, d6. And now, the move we haven't seen is knight to g5 now. So, we have seen a lot of right lever attempts during this saga. None of them works, but they could be extremely complicated, and they are not usually met with the usual way you will deal with the traditional fried lever, because you will play d5 in the fried lever, you know, and then you play knight a5. Besides, here is a bit more dangerous looking, but it's not really dangerous. The bishop is cutting us the possibility to castle. So usually when you play against the traditional fried lever, here you have a pawn in f7, you will just castle the king, you would be okay. But this is the more aggressive line, and it's absolutely fine. This knight g5 move never works. There is no such a thing as any line where it works. Anyway, knight g5. The best move in this position is here. You don't want to play queen e7. This is very important that you understand. At the end of this saga, you're gonna understand so much of how to master the Rousseau Gambit. If you play queen e7 here, because this is one of those games where our opponent played the pawn in b4 and you cannot play knight a5 threatening this bishop, means that the knight will have to go through this pattern. You will have, okay, if you play queen e8, queen e7, you can't play knight e7 with the idea of going to g6 and then f4. You may argue you can play knight d8 and then knight e6. Okay, that is exactly what we will have to do in this game. But the best move is bishop to g4 now, attacking the queen. Now f3 cannot be played. Bishop e2, or any reduction of the initiative, just favors us, because after taking and playing h6 or simply just castling, then white gives up the initiative completely. Especially, okay, let's say white plays queen e1 to get out of that attack. Queen to d7, and we're gonna be castling long side. The bishop is protecting this square, so we don't have to worry about bishop e6, although you might argue pawn to h3 is really dangerous. Let's make an example. If white plays bishop to d2, right, just to develop, you play h6. Position evaluated -3 something, because as soon as the knight moves, right, now that the queen is in e1, then you can just take the knight and break the pawn structure in front of the king, and this is doing just much better for us. So in this position, instead of bishop to d2, we'll see if white attacks our bishop immediately, h3. The idea is we can't go here because we get taken, and after we go to here, then our opponent can play this move here, and this is terrible. It looks horrible. I'm not even evaluating this, but obviously that's why the engine here says the best move is h6. You want the bishop to keep attacking this diagonal so that you don't have to worry about anything, but then when they take you, you can take this one. The rook is now on an open file. White's initiative is completely neutralized. You're winning this endgame. So in this position, we set bishop to g4. Let's look at this idea, by the way. Knight to f7, doing the fork already. Okay, well, we take the queen, they take our queen. You take this pawn. Knight returns with an attack on the rook. Rook to f8. Knight has to move again. Knight to g5, and now knight to d4. Black is simply up a pawn. We haven't even lost our right to castle, to be honest. So here, you're going to play h6, and position is evaluated -3 or -4 or something. White can't just play knight to f3, back to f3, because you're just going to take this pawn as well. You're winning immaterial even more, and yeah. So here, white can't really play the move f4, because then you can make a discover check. It's really strong discover check. You win everything you want, actually, with that check. So black's going to play h6. Okay, what if white plays bishop to e3? Okay, king to d7 is the best move here. And obviously taking, and then when we take back, we have a glorious bishop. We got the bishop pair, so our opponent shouldn't have any desire to actually swap give up the bishop pair when he's losing in material in an open end game. Rook a to c1. Let's look at this move. Okay, h6. Rook take now is not possible because you can take back. It looks like bishop takes. Should be a good move. Let's make an example. If the knight instead just goes to f3, remember, bishop, save the bishop by going to e4. That's fine. You can lose the bishop pair, but you go up 2 pawns. If instead our opponent plays this move, bishop takes to d4, and now there's an attack on our bishop, so it looks like we're going to lose a piece. So obviously the only thing left to do now is to take with the pawn so that it comes with an attack on this knight. Rook takes bishop, and now we take this knight, so the attack on this knight remains. That knight will have to move. Knight to d5. Now you can take in e4 with no repercussion. Position still evaluated -3. So that's going to be it. Another very important thing that has to be said for you to understand so much about how to play the Rousseau Gambit is still in the variation with d3, play knight f6. In the variation with bishop g5 immediately, so bishop g5 now pinning our knight, we attack the bishop straight away. Bishop takes, queen takes. And now this is the very important thing, one thing that happened to me in a FIDE tournament, in a game that I drew, even though I was completely winning at some point, but then completely losing at another point. White played this move anyway, a3. This was a very annoying move to me, because the whole idea of bishop e4, pinning the knight, taking here, doubling up and isolating this pawn, the whole thing has disappeared. Okay, right, so here's what we do in this position. It seems like you're going to give up on that, but actually a3 is a weak move. Take the pawn, pawn takes back, and now knight to d8 is the key move. So it looks like now the opponent can play knight c3, attacking, threatening to go to d5, and I wish I had seen all of this combination in the game, but I didn't. So I became a little passive, like Italy in any of the world wars, just waiting for anyone to appear to be winning, so that side of the war could be joined for better profit. So black now, the reason why knight to d8 is not only because he will have access to good squares, but also because it allows us to play c6. So a3 stopped our bishop from going to b4, but c6 stops the knight from going anywhere. Castle, bishop to c5. This is a good position for the black player. Queen e2 developing, b5 attacking the bishop. Bishop to b3, a5. Rook a to d1, d6. We never have to worry about the usually weak square d6, because it's protected by this bishop. This bishop cannot be kicked out, it cannot be attacked in any way. So let's make this move, for example, h3, stopping bishop g4 from happening. Of course, we wanted to play that. a4, bishop a2, knight to e6. And now any trade will be much more favorable for us. And obviously we have the bishop pair. And also now the knight is covering this diagonal, so we're ready to castle short and we're completely safe. Although if black were to play again now, the best move is by far knight to f4. Position evaluated -6 at this point. The idea with knight f4 is obviously to attack the queen moves away, then you got queen g6, threatening checkmate. Now you can argue that this can be met with knight to h5 attacking the queen, but here you play queen to g3, the pawn in f2 is pinned, you're coming with an attack on this knight, you're still threatening mate in case the knight moves, so you're threatening to just simply win the knight. So in this position, there's like some very good obvious options. Either white takes this incredible knight or plays g3 to stop the arrival of that knight. But if white plays g3, for example, to stop knight f4, knight to g5 comes, a double attack on this knight, so the knight will have to take, we also got an attack on this pawn, that means king to g2, which is a really stupid move, cannot happen also because now you got double attack on h3, so white will have to take us. But now something has happened, and this is like impossible now to come back for our opponent. Position evaluated -4 for a reason. So here, look, this rook is very strong, the bishop is very strong. There's no coming back here unless our opponent wants, well, you can't move the king anywhere. There's double attack on h3. So the idea here could be h4, because if we take, then our opponent can play g4. So the take is the best move, g4, and now the file is closed, and white has an idea of maybe playing king to h2, rook g1, or simply just survive. Like, it's just a nightmare of a position. Black goes on with queen f4, doubling the attack on the pawn. This bishop is completely useless, this knight is completely useless, the rooks are not doing anything. We're going to be playing bishop g4 soon enough. The pawn in f3, in f2 can't move to f3. Okay, so let's go back to this move here. Remember, everything fails, but as mentioned, this bishop is now useless. What if white just trades the bishop for our strong knight? Okay, this is white's best option. Black's position is still better, much better. We take back with the bishop, we got bishop pair, white can't move a thing without losing material. There's a, like, I don't know, maybe rook f to e1. It's not like white doesn't have a move. It literally doesn't have a move. Rook f to e1, and now castle. And you're actually okay. And the knight cannot go to h2 with the idea of going to g4, because we have triple attack right now to that square. So that's not possible, and you might argue, what if that had happened before? What if white now plays knight to h2? with the, keeping the rook protecting f2, with the idea of playing knight to g4. This is a move I actually have always found very annoying, because what do you do against it? You can't really play h5. It's an ugly position. Here you just play bishop c4, and there's no compensation for that. Even though the knight comes to g4, let's say, because like here you're winning material, right? So what if white counterattacks with knight to g4? That move will come with the chess, but now queen to g6, and you're preserving the material.